All right, what up? This is Joe, and from me to you, my guest today, we got Dr. Jeanita. How you doing, Dr. Jeanita?
I am doing awesome. How are you doing, Joe?
I'm doing well, and thank you for joining my platform today. It's my first ever Zoom interview, and I'm glad to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to talk to you and your audience.
I appreciate that. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So can you kind of share a little bit about your upbringing, like where were you born, where you grew up and stuff like that?
Absolutely. So I am originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I am a proud Steelers fan, black and yellow all day. Both my parents were actually scientists, and so that really plays a big role into who I am today. They both were nuclear engineers and went to an HBCU. And because of their upbringing, it really is what drove me to where I'm at today. I currently work as a scientist and a program manager and all these different things within the STEM world, or science, technology, engineering, and math world. But ultimately, I've really traveled the world trying to get others excited about science and hopefully encouraging others to pursue science. So I'm looking forward to really just sharing more of my story on your podcast.
Yeah, no, definitely love to hear that. And that's interesting. So could you kind of describe that? I guess having your parents as scientists back in your younger days, how was that experience there? Because this is my first time. I never knew anybody that had parents as scientists or anything like that. So how was that experience?
So can you imagine being a child and being told you're going to computer camp, or being a child and getting a microscope for Christmas? Well, that was my life. My parents were really like on a mission, literally, to get one of their kids into science. So very early on, I went into like the take your sons and daughters to work day things at my parents' jobs. And I knew early on, just because of what they had showed me, that I was interested in science. And that ultimately led me to, throughout college, pursue a degree in chemistry, and then ultimately land a job as working in the lab for many years, but then transitioning to now where I help scientists manage their careers better. It's quite interesting, quite honestly, because there's not a lot of Black scientists in general. Yeah. Definitely not a situation where you have two parents that have now born another scientist. So I consider myself like a unicorn in the field, because I have these like built-in mentors that I grew up with that helped me to decide to pursue the careers that I'm going after right now, or have gone after right now.
Yeah, no, that's definitely interesting to hear. And you're right. You're definitely right about a lot of those things. Now, I guess you say you're from Pennsylvania. So kind of describe to me, I guess, like what your hometown was like back then, because I know it's completely different now. So can you kind of give me a little insight there? Because I'm from Nashville here, so it's a little different.
Yeah, so yeah, definitely different from Nashville. So where I grew up, I was actually one of only 2 or maybe 3 Black families that grew up in my exact neighborhood. So it was not a huge population of Black kids growing up. So of course, then when I would be around other Black kids in the city, they'd be like, "Well, you talk white, you do," it was this whole thing when I was growing up. But it was a great environment because there was just a lot of like places for my parents to take me to explore. We used to go to museums, and like I mentioned, computer camps and things of that nature. But what got me down to Nashville was I actually went on a college tour when I was in high school, and we did a college tour, like a HBCU college tour, where I got to see schools all across like the East Coast pretty much. I knew from like watching Different World, and then also knowing that my parents went to an HBCU, that I wanted to go to an HBCU. And so it was more of a matter of figuring out what HBCU aligned with the things I was looking for, and which at that point, I didn't know what I was looking for. I was looking for like a great campus, a thing that had a good, place that had a nice major, and then where I could have fun. And luckily I went to TSU, or Tennessee State University, on a Wednesday, and you know about those Wednesdays. And I fell in love with the campus. And it was at that moment when I came to visit, they had a great chemistry program. The campus was beautiful. The people were friendly, that I decided that, I'm going to apply and see if I can, take my talents down there. So probably, I don't know, maybe like February, March timeframe, I found out that I got accepted, and then was able to, put all the wheels in motion to get me from down to Nashville. I've lived away from Pittsburgh at this point in my life longer than I actually lived there. Because after high school, I haven't lived there since then, and have now been kind of in a variety of different places since the time I grew up there.
Okay, well, yeah, no, that's cool. You know, I was definitely gonna kind of get into that and see what kind of drove you to, like you said, you had the HBCU tour. So I'm gonna ask you what kind of drove you to TSU. So back when you were young, you already had that mindset that you were gonna go to well, not TSU, but once you go to college, you're gonna already be a chemist, or I'm gonna study chemistry or something like that.
Well, so what got me into chemistry, so like I said, my parents were scientists, and so they encouraged me exploring things. They encouraged me to be, you know, the nerd or whatever. But of course, when I was in high school, I was not feeling it, right? Yeah. I didn't want to be known as the nerd. I didn't want to be, so I rebelled quite honestly, very hard. And then until my grade year, I took my first chemistry class. So I took biology, maybe like 9th grade, and I did okay, you know, as good as I could, whatever. But then 10th grade, this was really the pivotal moment and when I knew I was going to do chemistry. So at that time, I had, you know, was good in math. I liked science, but I was still in that rebellious phase. I didn't want to be the smart girl. And so I was just doing the enough to get by. But the pivotal moment for me, how I got to chemistry, my chemistry teacher in 10th grade pulled me to the side at our like 9-week check-in. The first, you know, we used to have 9-week check-in. So like first 9 weeks, second 9 weeks, third 9, so forth. So the first 9-week check-in, he pulled me to the side and he was like, okay, so, you know, my parents are over there. And he was like, so you see this set of grades, these grades, you know, these are all the A's, these are the B's, so forth. But he was like, you see this last A. Well, this A is you. And he was like, now, technically, you didn't earn that A, but I see something in you that tells me that you could earn that A. Mm-hmm. And something in me like clicked, like, well, wait a minute, I don't want somebody just giving me something. Like, I too know I can do this. I'm just like, I'm not turning assignments. I'm not coming to class as often as I'm supposed to be, because again, I don't want to be the nerd. And something in me like literally clicked at that moment that I was like, oh no, I'm not here for handouts. Like I'm gonna earn this grade here on out. And so literally after that day, I started putting all my efforts forth, like, and doing the work and actually turning in the work, which was important to get the grade, right? And from there on, he actually started inviting me to actually come back and be like a lab assistant for him in later years. And he really just, you know, poured into me as a mentor to let me know that, you know, hey, this is something that you can do. You are more than capable. This is something you should consider pursuing. And so I loved that particular teacher, Mr. Stackowitz. His teaching style was just so, it was kind of off the wall. A lot of students didn't really like him because he was like very in your face, very like, I'm going to have this like explosion going off over here. But for me, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And so I found myself starting to emulate a lot of his, you know, his teaching style when I started working with students, because he started letting me tutor students and everything like that. And so it was probably at the end of my 10th grade year going into my 11th grade year that I decided, okay, I'm going to do chemistry. I like chemistry over any of the other sciences that I took because it combined math, which I was really strong in, and the basic sciences. And I decided at that point, I went to TSU actually to major in chemistry education. I was like, I'm going to be a chemistry teacher. Like, that's what I'm going to do. I want to help people become, you know, familiar with chemistry. And so that, you know, really that moment, like literally is like ingrained in my mind as to how I got into chemistry. So like my parents, they were actually engineers, they're nuclear engineers, and I hated physics. And so that's why I didn't go that route. But my teacher, he's the person that really got me into chemistry. And then a lot of the teachers that I had at TSU just kept feeding into that you know, this idea that I could be a really strong chemist. And that ultimately led me to finishing my degree.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I like to hear that. It's very interesting because there's always that one teacher that kind of gets to every student. So
oh yeah.
Cool. Now, I guess was he I guess your biggest influence, I guess, into chemistry, just based upon what you just said? It sounds like it to me.
So I would say he was a critical influence. Okay. When I look back throughout my career, I've had a lot of influences, and each have you know, dictated different parts of my life. So he's who got me to chemistry, right? And then I had a professor at TSU, Dr. Vercruci. He was my biochem teacher. I mean, he literally showed me the ropes. He literally showed me how to work different analytical machines. He helped me to just become a better researcher. And so I would say he's the person that helped me to have the confidence to be a true researcher, not only just doing chemistry, but do research. And then in my, my first big girl job, once I had finished with my graduate degree and everything like that, I had another mentor, Ms. Janice Brown Thomas, who she really is who helped me understand how to take the skills that I had in the lab and outside of the lab and pivot them into my career that I have now. And so she was a really big mentor when it came to networking and developing my soft skills and developing kind of like my leadership persona when it comes to, deciding that ultimately why I love chemistry. I didn't want to stay in the lab, and I wanted to navigate to a position where I could actually help other people become better scientists and so forth. So I would say probably those three have been my biggest influences beyond my parents. Of course, my parents are top.
For sure.
But those three would then be like the people that probably played the biggest influence in my life.
Yeah, no, and it's good to hear, because everybody, you never know who you meet that kind of plays a pivotal role throughout your experience and kind of give you that push, or just something that you may pull, or some kind of takeaway that you pull from them that you kind of
absolutely
yourself, for sure. And I know you're very accredited, so you have the bachelor's from Tennessee State University, the doctorate in analytical chemistry from the University of Illinois, several certificates, executive certificate of leadership from Georgetown, and one in diversity from Cornell. I'm going to ask you a little bit still, just in regards to your school experience, before I kind of get to your professional experience. Now, before we go there, like, did you kind of go straight through and then start professionally, or did you kind of graduate and then start working, go back, and how did that go about?
So a little bit of both. So going from my undergraduate degree at TSU, or TTTSSSU, I went to UIC, University of Illinois, Chicago. So that was straight through. So I was in a program at TSU called the MARC program, or Minority Access to Research Careers. And what that allowed me to do was get research experience, but it was contingent on the idea that I would go to get a PhD. And so when I finished the program, I decided to look for schools that would allow me to get a PhD in chemistry, but also explore forensic science. At that time, I was really interested in forensic science and potentially becoming like a toxicologist. And so there's only a few countries or few universities in the country that offer any advanced degree courses in forensic science. And so University of Illinois was one of those schools that, one, had the forensic courses, two, was paying me the most, and three, allowed me to do research that I was passionate about. So at that time, my grandfather had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and my mom was dealing with diabetes. And so I actually found a research advisor that had some research going on in both those areas. And so I ultimately chose UIC for, like I said, the multitude of reasons. They were paying me the most. They had research I cared about and was passionate about, and I can take the forensic science courses outside of it. So I went straight through there. So I did 4 years at TSU and then 5.5 years at UIC. And so traditionally, people may get like a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and then a PhD. So you're looking at like 4 years, 2 years, and then, I don't know, 4 to 5, maybe 6 years, depending on. So I skipped that middle step. And so I did 4 years for TSU and then 5.5 years to get my PhD, and then started teaching immediately after. And so my initial set of schooling was straight through, like, bachelor's, PhD, and then let me go get my big girl job. But in the interim, as I have ultimately realized some of the things that I was more passionate about beyond working in the laboratory, I then decided to go back to school. And so in 2018, I decided to go back to Georgetown for an executive certificate in leadership coaching. This happened after I had already pivoted out of working in the lab and I was working in a management position. And then 2019, when the pandemic hit, end of 2019, I finished at Georgetown. Then 2020, when the pandemic hit, I decided to go back to school at Cornell for a certificate in diversity and inclusion. And then just recently, I actually just completed a certificate at University of South Florida in another diversity, inclusion, and equity in the workplace certificate. So I consider myself a forever learner. And so I'm gonna always go back to school, especially if someone else is paying for it.
I could definitely understand that. That sounds like a great program that you were in. What was that called again? The Mark, what?
So MARC, so it's Minority Access to Research Careers. And so what that, I mean, is a phenomenal program that a lot of schools, the cool thing about it, that it will pay your tuition. So after you're at most schools, I believe you're eligible after your sophomore year. And then from your sophomore year through your senior year, you can get your tuition paid for. Then on top of that, you also get a stipend monthly to do research at the school. And so that's where I started working with Dr. Vercruci, who I mentioned was a pivotal mentor in my life. And then on top of that, they also require you to do an internship during the summer. So now as a college student, I was earning money during my summer internship and then earning money monthly just to do research at the school. And so it's a great way to, one, supplement your income, but two, get your tuition paid, and then they are looking for you. They're basically poising you to go get a PhD. So the design of the program is really for pushing more people that are from underrepresented communities. So when I say underrepresented, I mean Black, brown people, women, those that are in marginalized communities, and getting them into sectors that they are not traditionally represented. So science, technology, engineering, math, there's not a lot of people that look like me. And so there are always opportunities out there for people to provide funding for you to pursue these. And so the MARC program, or like I said, the Minority Access to Research Career Fellowship is I wouldn't be where I'm at if it were not for that program.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that's going around. It's still currently ongoing program.
As far as I know, it is still ongoing. Again, I'm not sure. I'm fairly confident it's still at TSU and it's at multiple institutions. And so it's I believe NSF, or National Science Foundation funded program. I have to fact check that in a little bit, but I'm fairly confident that it is still around and it is a funded program. But even if not, for people that are from marginalized communities, there's just a lot of resources out there to help you get there. We are trying to move the needle on the representation of Black people specifically, especially in the last year and a half, of getting just more of us into the pipeline. So even if MARC is not still available, there are a ton of different opportunities that are still out there.
Yeah, no, that was a great program for sure. And then I know you were kind of talking about like forensics. And then when I think like forensic, I think like CSI and that crime drama stuff. So is that the type of forensics type of stuff that you were into, or trying to get into something different?
Well, okay, so I love that you said that, CSI, right? Yeah. So every time I say forensics, that's the first place people's minds goes. Like CSI, Law and Order, they see it, right? So, so yes, I am into those shows, 100%. I love those shows. They're great for the wow factor, right? But what they do is they almost oversell what's actually happening, right? So you'll have the one person, they appear on the crime scene and they see the dead body. And then I'm going to get the sample and I'm going to run to the lab and I'm going to test the sample. And then I'm going to run back to the detective and I'm going to say, hey, detective, I found this in the system. And then I'm going to be in the court. So it makes it seem like it's this one person that's doing all of the things, right? And so when I first was interested in forensic science, that was my mindset, like, oh gosh, that's what I want to do. But in reality, that's not how it works. There are multiple people that are part of that chain, right? And so for me, I'm an analytical chemist, which means I like to take something and break it down and tell you what's there. And so I was very heavy into drug toxicology and physical pattern evidence analysis. And so my research was really focused on, at least in when I went to my first big girl job, was understanding how like drugs, how they accumulate in your hair, and understanding what different like cosmetic treatments impact your drug testing capabilities. And so so it's could be a piece of CSI, but it's not like what the TV show tells you in CSI. So I was more involved in the research and understanding how well do certain tests work versus I'm on, find a dead body and I'm gonna, figure out who done it. It was more about figuring out like how accurate are the tests that are out there, because there's a lot of biases that exist in some of the tests that are available currently. And so my goal was to really help, remove some of those things and really get to the science behind them. So like one of the big research papers that I had really early on in my career was understanding how like hair relaxers, how they impacted drug testing. And so there was a ton of studies out there where people had looked at like, perms, hair coloring, shampooing, all these different things, but no one had thought to look at like a relaxer. How does a relaxer affect drug testing? And me being a Black woman, understanding that this is a very common thing, I was like, well, why hasn't anybody tested this? And so I tested, and like it's come to find out, like it can sway the results of a hair drug test significantly. And so things like that, I was able to uncover simply because of like my identity and bringing the perspective that I have as a Black woman to the lab. I also did a lot of research around explosives in soil and seeing how well you can recover those after the fact, and some like methamphetamine remediation, like cleaning up meth labs, how well do those things work? So I was not in the glamorized CSI that most people think about, but I was kind of the behind the scenes and making sure that the technology that's being used or the methods that are being used in some of these tests were accurate. And so I always like to tell that story because a lot of people think about forensic science, but they don't understand there's so many pieces that you involved in.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you had so much information that like, it's so many questions that I want to ask you about each individual topic. I promise I do well, because I don't even know where to start. I do want, before I forget, I do want to know, you kind of mentioned in regards to like the perm, you kind of answered one of my questions in regards to like the drug testing and the perm and the relaxers and stuff like that. But how else do drugs accumulate in your hair or in regards to testing and stuff like that? If you can maybe share.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, when you ingest anything, right, it gets deposited in various parts of your body, right? It gets deposited in your fat cells. It can be excreted in your urine, your blood, and it's deposited in your hair. The hair is one of those places that once it's there, it stays there for a long time. And you can almost develop like a timeline of drug usage from someone's hair. And so that's why the hair testing it's pretty unique compared to like urine, because urine, different drugs will leave your urine much faster based off of how they're structured. Like if they're fat soluble or if they're not fat soluble, they leave your urine a lot faster. But once it's in the hair, it's in the hair. And so a lot of companies may utilize, your hair as a means to figure out if you've been doing chronic usage, like using over time, versus if you are just, oh, I've only used it one time, that's where urine is better. And so, yeah, when you ingest something, it's in your hair. But a lot of times people will do kind of like the quick screen with the urine. And if it passes that, they won't go to the extent of doing the hair. But there's, like I said, I'll, pretty much think about anything that you could do to your hair to manipulate it could impact a drug test. And so it's understanding which different cosmetic treatments may is the thing that kind of scientists need to be aware of as they're using these to make deciding factors. And it could impact it for the good or for the bad, right? So there's certain things that you may do to your hair that may make the drug seem over amplified more than it's there. And there's certain things you can do that can strip it completely away. And so it's important as the tester to understand, okay, well, what have you done to your hair so that we can know, are these tests even, valid whenever we read them?
Yeah, that's wild information. That's pretty cool. So I want to kind of ask you, I guess now we're on the subject, before we kind of get more into like some of your professions, because I still want to ask you more about what those research stuff that you did in the labs and things like that. But like during your your college experience, like what was some of like one big takeaway that you'll say that that stuck out to you in regards to working within your or within that field of study that you said, I never would have knew this, or something that has rung a bell that I guess that you pulled from like studying or something like that, or maybe a lecture or something?
One big takeaway. That's a good question. For me, probably my biggest takeaway that I had while I was going through school was that everything seemed cool, right? Everything seemed like really cool. Like, oh my gosh, it seems so exciting. I can't wait to like, I remember, well, again, my first time actually getting to step into a friend's lab. It seemed really cool. But it's important to do like internships so you can find out, do you really like something? A lot of times people think, oh, I want to do an internship to gain experience, to earn money. And of course, those are very true. But the thing that I found most beneficial in any internship that I did was that it helped me to figure out things I didn't want to do, right? So like when I worked in a lab where I was doing like organic synthesis. So I was like designing and creating new things. I was like, I don't like this. I worked in a lab where I worked with rats and had to like, handle rats daily. And I was like, oh, I don't like this either. So probably just for me, the biggest aha moments came from just me actually getting the experience, like going beyond what I see in the textbook and working in the lab and seeing these things in real life and deciding, is this something I want to pursue further or is this not for me? So that would be probably the biggest recommendation I give to anybody. Do internships because they will help you figure out what you like and what you don't like.
Yeah, no, most definitely. That's great advice. I appreciate that for sharing. So my next question is, I know, I guess after you kind of began your career as doing research, developing what kind of just different materials for cloud? I'm not sure. I'm kind of trying to read it from my notes here, but
Yeah.
can you kind of share a little bit about your early experience when you started your professional career?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually have to step back from where you're talking about to like my first step in my professional career, right? Because first, many people think, you get a job, you get your degree, you're going to have a job, especially, I came out of school, I'm PhD, I got a doctorate, I'm Dr. Jeanita. So I was expecting that, jobs is just coming everywhere. And unfortunately, I graduated during the recession. And so jobs were not coming just, everywhere. And so actually my very first job after I finished my degree was teaching. And so it's kind of like full circle, right? Because if you remember in my story, I told you I went off to school to actually pursue becoming a chemistry teacher, right? And what I didn't say earlier was that I ultimately decided probably like my sophomore year, I didn't want to pursue chemistry education anymore because of the MARC program, because I decided to go this research route. I actually changed my major to just chemistry. But my first job actually out of school was as a chemistry professor. So that came from just people I had in my network, and somebody called me and was like, hey, they're looking for teachers at Chicago State. Can you get down there today? And I was like, yeah, I'll be there. And I went down there and I applied for my job. And ultimately got it. Well, like 2 weeks later, after I had signed my contract, the job that I ultimately ended up where I'm currently still at now, they reached out to me and said, we have this position open. Is there any way you can come on board? Well, prior to that, they had declined me earlier, like a couple weeks before, and like, so sorry you didn't get it. So I retorted like, okay, well, I've just started this position. So this contract runs out at the end of May. And so if you can hold the position, then I will, gladly be there 2 days later. And so luckily they gave me a little bit more time, and then I ended up coming to the federal government. And so since I've been here, I actually started working on developing what are called reference materials. And so reference really something that are used, like the best thing I could say to it, like, right, you go to the doctor and the doctor says, okay, I'm going to screen your blood and I'm going to look for cholesterol, glucose, whatever. And they come back and say, oh my goodness, you have high cholesterol. Well, how do you know that the instrument that they use to test your blood was working properly? Right? How do you know that? Well, the way you know is because they use reference materials to also test alongside of your samples, right? So as long as they get the answer right in the reference material, then they can have confidence in whatever they're telling you about your blood, your urine, whatever. And so like literally, if you go to any hospital, they have reference materials that are available. The design of them is so that it can help remove possible errors. Like, so it can help troubleshoot any possible errors. So as long as you're getting this reference material value correct, then you can have confidence in what you're saying this unknown sample or your patient sample is. And so I was working on reference materials for clinical, like that very reference material that I'm telling you about that they would run against your blood. I was working on that one, but then also worked on a couple of different forensic-based ones, some in the food space, and then some in like tobacco space. My last one that I worked on was like in the tobacco realm. Yeah, ultimately I ended up from there. I knew early on that while I liked the lab was not where I wanted my career to go. And it was a hard transition because a lot are kind of telling me like, well, no, you need to stay in the lab. We don't have many Black people in the lab. We need you to be there. And I'm like, okay, this is great, but I'm not feeling fulfilled. And so it was probably about 4 or 5 years after I worked in the lab that I started kind of planning my exit strategy to go from working in the lab to now helping others, really find their place in the lab. So, I went from working in the lab to ultimately going to South Africa for like 3 months to do like STEM education outreach for a little bit, and then transitioned to like an advising role where I was helping leaders define what direction our laboratory should be going to. And then most recently, actually, I even have a new title now. So actually, this is not even updated on there because this is just as of 2 days ago. But I transitioned to like a program management role where I was now working on managing programs for people. And then like literally just like yesterday, will be transitioning into a new role in like a week or so, where I'll be focusing on our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies for our laboratories. And so I've had quite a pivot when you think about like, coming to science and what brought me to science and now where I'm at currently in my career.
Correct. Yeah, you never know what path you're going to go. You always start out kind of maybe going one way that you maybe think is the way, or somebody maybe trying to follow, but you always end up having your own path. So no, that's
absolutely.
And I just want to ask, I guess, more, every time you say something, I have a million questions pop up in my head, but just like in regards to like the laboratory and the reference materials. So let's just say you said something in regards to like a hospitals and the blood pressure. So I just made me think, okay, let's just say something happened to somebody and it was regarding blood pressure and they have a lawsuit going on. So they would, are you all somebody that you all would have a service to like make sure, or they will outsource a service to see if this is proven to be a legit piece of blood pressure equipment for like a some kind of civil case or something like that?
So yes and no. So we are non-regulatory, so we are not utilized in so much in that manner. But what people will do is often just ask to see like calibration data. So like, when was the last time this instrument was calibrated? And if it wasn't calibrated to the reference material recently, then it may be possible that this evidence may be thrown out. So like, kind of like how speedometers, like speeding, right? They don't pull you over if you're under a certain, within a certain range. And that's because it's calibrated to a certain, certain number. And so there's reference materials that are available, reference standards that are available to help make sure that, okay, has this last been calibrated? And if it hasn't, then yeah, it's possible that something could be thrown out, but that's not really the role of my organization. The role of our organization is really just to make sure that measurements are being done properly. And then should someone need that information to support something, in a legal realm, it's possible that they can use it, but that's not the role of our agency.
Okay, that was just like my own personal question, because based upon, because this is my first time hearing this kind of information. So it's interesting to me. But no, that's interesting as well. So I mentioned you were, I guess, working within South Africa. within a STEM program, or
Yeah.
could you kind of explain that? It took me forever to kind of figure out the acronym STEM myself, because I'm ignorant to the term. So it's science, technology, engineering, and math.
Yes, yes, yes. So yes, I say STEM so frequently. It doesn't dawn on me to always clarify. So yes, science, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And I actually operate in STEAM. So STEAM is science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And so that's incorporating the arts. So whether that be physical arts, music, arts, just it really helps to increase the learning environment, promote a positive learning environment. So I actually went to South Africa on I don't want to say a whim, but it was kind of like just a random series of events that led to that, my ability to go there, and the relationship that has been forged since then. But the State Department has a program called the Embassy Science Fellowship, where they bring scientists to different places around the world, where they have embassies and they have projects that they are supporting in a variety of fields. And so this particular effort that was taking place in South Africa was focused on improving the education system there, and specifically in the science, technology, engineering, and math realm. And the reason that's important, we in the US often take our education system for granted, right? We a lot of times, even our worst education systems can still sometimes be better than other places, right? And so in the particular region that I was going to, there were a lot of places that, literally the only science they were getting was during a week-long or 2-week-long science festival that was being held in the country. And so for me, I went over there to work on this festival. And so I worked as a logistics officer and program officer, where I was developing curriculum to teach students new and innovative ways to learn science with very limited resources. So I'm talking about using water bottles and using balloons and popsicles as to teach science. And that's because you may not have access to the high powered instruments or the fancy equipment, but you can get a balloon pretty easily. And I can teach a lot of science through that. And so my role in South Africa was kind of, I don't say like maybe threefold. It was to come up with new curriculum for this science festival. It was to deliver the content. So actually doing the science demos and getting people like going into like the mall and doing science demos in all different places, and doing kind of like outreach tours where I was going to different schools across the coast, and then also training teachers. And so much like here, a lot of teachers there land in the science like teaching by default, like not that they are formally trained as teachers and or that they're formally trained as science teachers. And so I came up with a series of curriculum to teach teachers better ways to teach their subjects. And so just giving them kind of like full take and incorporate into their lesson plans so that their students can feel more engaged and that the teacher would feel more confident teaching. And so I spent 3 months from January through end of March, kind of developing curriculum, traveling literally the whole Eastern coast. And then at the end of it, the culmination, like the end product was this festival. And over that time frame, I delivered, I came up with, I think, almost like 10 new workshops for the festival itself. But we had over 65,000 people attend this festival. Yeah, it was a huge deal. And for many of the students that attended, that was their science class for the year. And so like to be able to impact so many students with not only like the new things that I added, but just like some of the enhancements that were also added to other existing curriculum, it really made a world of difference. And so I did that for, like I said, my 3-month stint. And then I've gone back twice since then, just to the first time check in. Like, so I also trained maybe like 6 or so workshop facilitators to be able to keep the workshops that I had brought to them going. And then, so I went back the next year to make sure they were still working well. And then I came back 2 years later and brought a whole new series of workshops with me to like teach people and they can incorporate it into their program. And then I was supposed to go back again in 2020, but then, COVID happened. And so now we're here. But I did end up doing like virtual STEM engagement with them. And so my connections there reached out to me and they'd seen some of the stuff I was putting on like social media platforms of just like showing science demos and things. And they were like, hey, we see you're doing this. Would you be like a virtual program for us? And I was like, I mean, I haven't done it before, but why not? And so we kicked it off with like six or so workshops that I did virtually with them. And it was like mind blowing how well it went. And then since then I've been operating independent of them, but, with my own company, running a series of just hands-on STEM-based workshops that people can participate from anywhere in the world. So it's been kind of cool to see how that, initial touch point in South Africa has led to where I'm at today.
Yeah, definitely. Because I like that STEAM that STEAM, your website, because you have a lot of great things there. I'm going to ask you about that in a minute, but I was going to ask you about like what takeaways or how well do you think they received it? But from what you described, the turnout, the festivals and things like that, that's just incredibly amazing. And I had a previous interview with Dr. Nyange on one of our earlier interviews. But she was talking about, she went to Tanzania and she's like in the nursing world. And then she kind of did the something similar to kind of what you did, kind of develop curriculum and stuff and things like that. But what she had mentioned one time, what she had mentioned during the interview was there was not too many people of color in that particular field. So what she was trying to do was like, I guess, just let them know there are people of colors that know the same thing as others. Now, from your experience, I'm not sure in your particular field, but you kind of mentioned here is not there, but what about in your field there? Was it like how was like, I guess you were received by your peers there? Did they kind of feel a certain type of way?
Oh, it was interesting there because, at first glance, South Africa is a very, diverse makeup. There's over 13 different languages there, national languages, and it's a very, very diverse makeup. And so a lot of people that were there, like, especially, the people that I would hang around with, initially, they thought I was from Africa. So they didn't necessarily think I was from the US until they heard me speak, right? And so then once they heard me speak, they're like, oh, you're an American? Like, okay. So then it's like, oh, but you're a scientist. So that like automatically kind of gave me this, different air that they saw me in, or if you will. But whether here or there in the science field, there's just not a lot of people that look like me. I mean, in fact, if you Google like, what does a scientist look like?
Yeah,
I guarantee there is going to be somewhere in those the majority of those Google images are going to be a white man holding green stuff, probably looking like he's going to blow up something and with crazy hair. Very rarely do you see a Black woman with, normally, my hair is out in my, natural state, that likes to kick it. Like, you don't see, that's not the image that they see portrayed. And so that was very similar here and there. And so, that was one of the things I remember with that festival, that despite being in South Africa, a lot of the presenters that they had actually presenting, because they would bring people from all around the world, were still not Black scientists. So across the globe, we are underrepresented. I think in the chemistry realm, we make up less than 3% of the PhDs that are out there. So we are a very, very small piece of the puzzle when it comes to the scientists that people are getting to engage with or learn from or see on a regular basis.
Yeah, definitely not. That's just kind of, it's incredible. It's not far-fetched to hear, but that's why I guess my platform is here to kind of just share and so everybody can kind of, because nobody, if if maybe you didn't have any exposure to that kind of atmosphere, then you might not went down that realm. But a lot of people don't even have any exposure because I've never known a scientist, you know what I'm saying, or any kind of
Right.
within that field. But also speaking of, one of the most famous scientists that I know as a kid was Bill Nye the Science Guy. So I'm assuming you are going to be the new version of Bill Nye. What is your, do you go have like a science alias or something?
So I don't necessarily have a science alias. I mean, I'm just Dr. J whenever I'm out on, doing my engagement thing. But I mean, I do have, my personal business, Steam Forward Academy. And so I am hoping that that's going to take the world by storm. And people are going to look to us as kind of the new faces. I don't want to say replacing Bill Nye, but, stepping up behind Bill Nye, because he is, as well as many other science communicators, paved the way for us to be even, popularizing science, right? So, back in the day when I was young, being a scientist was not the cool thing to do. Like it was not, like, I didn't want to be known as the girl that did science. Like that was not it. But he brought a human aspect to it, like where people see like, oh, okay, this is just like, it can be cool. But I would say, when you think about like things that you're seeing on social media, like TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, you're seeing more of the personalities behind the scientists, and people are now embracing that so much more. So I haven't come up with a fun, I used to go by the Sheet Geek, that was many years ago, but now it's just Dr. J. Keep it simple so you can find me very easily. Yeah, so now I operate as me, and I want people to see that you can really need a gimmicky name to connect with people, right? I can come to any platform and be me, and hopefully connect with the students that I'm working with and inspire them, just by telling my story and helping them to see that, yeah, I'm a scientist, but guess what? I also play football, or guess what? I like trap music, or guess what? I also like to kick it. And so like, hopefully just, bringing my authentic self to them is enough to inspire them that they too can find their place in science.
Yeah, I think people find that within whatever they kind of look at and see, because Bill, he made science cool for me as a kid. So maybe you can make science cool for somebody else as a kid as well, because they can see themselves in you, especially for one thing. That's a big one, I would say. So that's pretty good. Could you kind of tell me a little bit more about the Steam Forward? It was called Steam Forward, is that correct?
So I would say this, Steam Forward Academy. Oh, I just can't believe where it's gone, quite honestly. Like I could not have imagined that I would be in the position with Steam Forward where I'm at today. So it literally started probably like 2017, where I was just for free giving, doing science demos with the kids during the summertime, just to like keep them engaged throughout the summertime. Like that was my thing. I look forward to it every year. I would gather some of my friends and like, hey, let's just go, gather some people, see who's interested, do science with them. And then the pandemic hit. And I look at the pandemic as, a gift and a curse, quite honestly, because obviously couldn't go out and just go connect with people the way I would, but it opened my mind to different possibilities that could exist, right? And so maybe April of last year, 2020, I had a friend, just again, he knew I was a scientist. He knew I used to do these kind of these engagements. At that time, it was not virtual, but he was like, hey, Jeanita, my daughter's birthday is coming up. It doesn't look like we're going to be able to have friends around because, April, May time last year, we were in complete lockdown. And he was like, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to do like a science themed birthday party for us virtually. And I was like, I've never done this before, but sure. I'm like, if you know anything about me, I don't turn down too many challenges. Like I'll figure a way, right? And so I decided, okay, let me come up with this, a curriculum. I already have I have 1,000,001 science activities that you can do, right, in my head. So I was like, okay, let's try this, this, and this. This would package well, whatever. And so I told him like what supplies to get. He made these really cute little, packets and gave them to the kids. And oh my goodness, it was such a success. Like the parents loved it, the kids loved it. Like we're like blowing up balloons with chemistry. We are making ice cream with chemistry. I mean, it was fun. And the kids were learning, but having fun. So immediately I got all this feedback from the parents, like, when is it, how do I book you? And I'm like, I don't even have a website. Like, I don't, this is just something I just did for my friend. Yeah. And so, but the one thing I did was I posted about it on social media. And so doing that, I then had the connection I had in Africa. They saw what I posted, and that's where they asked, like, hey, would you be willing to do something for us? And I was like, okay, sure. And now at this point, now we're like end of August by the time I finished that, and not thinking that this could turn into anything. But then it was like, oh, well, wait, students are not going back to school. Like this is a thing. And so I had a few parents who had seen me posting about the different activities I was involved in, like, hey, my child's still virtual. Are you going to be offering anything? And I was like, you know what? I've gotten too many inquiries about this to not make this a thing. And so, I hit up a couple of my friends and said, I have a, huge friend group of women science. I was like, hey, would you guys want to come on board with me? I have this idea. I've been doing this, and I think we can, market this. And not from the standpoint of, oh, I want to make millions of dollars. I mean, of course I want to make money, but not from the standpoint, I'm going to charge millions of dollars for you to participate. Like, I want to create a program that is accessible. Anybody can do from anywhere. And whether you have a science background or not, you will have fun. And we launched it in September of last year. We were like, okay, let's just do like an 8-week program and let's see what it does. Well, we sold out. And so I was like, okay, this is cool. Things are going great. Well, so then just posting a little bit more, again, I started realizing the power of social media. And then I had some friends actually from Nashville that reached out to me that are principals in schools that were like, hey, I see what you're doing. Can you do this for our school? And I'm like, well, haven't done this, but yeah, sure, we can do it for your school. So I'm a very like, yeah, we'll do it. And then we'll figure it out behind the scenes later. And so we went into our first contract with Warner Arts Magnet School in Nashville. And oh my goodness, the students loved it. The parents loved it. And so then from word of mouth, we ended up getting a contract with Glencliff Elementary School in Nashville. And then just other organizations, like we've gotten to do workshops with the LA Sparks. They have like the women's NBA team. They have a science-based program. We've done some stuff with Jack and Jill, 2 of the different chapters in Jack and Jill. And then just a number of different other organizations that have reached out to us. And so like, literally to sit back and think like this started from just a birthday party, kind of like, me deciding to do a birthday party to now, a year later, we've delivered over 75 workshops virtually for kids literally across the world. Like I've had kids in South Africa participate, London participate, all across the US. And it's literally just bringing affordable, relatable science right to the comfort of your home. And so the beauty about our program is that the way we've designed it, kids can participate either at home, or let's say that a classroom wants to bring us into their school. As long as you have a projector, you can project us on a screen. We can then teach your class for you. And so that was the novelty about how our program is structured, and why teachers loved it. Is like, oh, word, I don't have to teach. Like, all I got to do is get some supplies, and then you're going to teach the class. And so, teachers loved it, principals loved it. And then again, all of my facilitators look like me. And so you have a series of Black women, all PhD. So then it's, when we're talking, it's like Dr. Jeanita, Dr. Monique, Dr. Nicole, Dr. Yasmin. So like, and then we're calling the students doctor as well. So it's like, we're acclimating them that this is you. Like, you don't even have to, think, could I be? No, you're here. You're already acting as a scientist. We're helping you to make those connections to the science that we're doing in real life. And I think that has been like the foundation for success for our program so far.
Yeah, no, that's great. And you go ahead and trying to push it on them, go ahead and claim it, doctor already. But no, that was when I looked at the website and I seen everybody's picture, it said doctor, 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 doctor. I was very much so impressed. And then I got to look in, you do like the virtual parties, even do speaking engagements and stuff. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So we get a lot of just kind of requests for like motivational speaking. So a lot of times people just want to like hear your story. Like, how did we get to the position that we're in. And so the thing I love about my entire team is that each one of us, although we are currently, in this doctor status, we have all overcome so many hurdles just to get to this place. I have people that are first gen professionals, people that have any obstacle you can think of overcoming, they have overcome, and they're thriving and just, living the dream right now. And so for them to be able to share their story with you, just requests of just kind of like that motivational, your STEM story talk, and then just requests for a variety of other kind of engagements. But most of the things are either that motivational story or just the hands-on component as well.
And then also you have the facilitate to motivate as well. Can you kind of share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I am a woman of many, many hats. And the pandemic has made that even easier. But so yeah, Facilitate to Motivate actually started in a time of, what's the word I want? Controversy, if you will. I was furloughed at the time. So furloughed, for those that don't know, means you're not working. And I wasn't working for like 8 weeks. And so, not getting a check for 8 weeks makes you get real creative real quick. Sure. Just I had these ideas. So like, I love working with kids. That's, I love getting kids excited about science. But another big passion of mine is like helping professionals elevate themselves, right? So it's great that you got the degree, but then what do you do, right? Are especially like, people, again, my jam is Black and brown people. I want to make sure that we're doing well. And, a lot of times what I was seeing in the different roles that I had was that we would get the degree and then almost in some certain situations become complacent, in some certain situations become overlooked, in some certain situations feel undervalued, in some certain situations just not working to our fullest potential. And so just talking with some of my colleagues about some of the ideas that we had in our head of how we could just help our people do better. From that, Facilitate to Motivate was born. It was literally like, and we were literally in the trenches, right? At that moment, all three of the, our founders, we were not working, none of us. We had zero check coming in. And we're like, well, wait, how can we use our skill set to motivate others, right? And so that's literally where Facilitate to Motivate came from. And so our mission is really to work with millennials and specifically women of color, to help them to achieve success on their own terms. And so what we really work on is providing professional development trainings, coaching, and just other opportunities to help elevate you to the next level. And the next level may be different for every single person. So some people may be looking at just completing a degree. Some people may be looking at, okay, I have my entry-level job. How do I get to that leadership position? Some people may be like, okay, I want to leave my job completely. How do I pivot? And so what we do is we have combined our expertise in science and technology, as well as social and emotional learning, to help people be poised for success. And so we do coaching where we help to uncover kind of some of those hurdles that people need to uncover, and then provide these, game plan. Go from this point to that point. How do I, get from this vision that I have for myself? How do I get there? Like, I know where I ultimately see myself going, but a lot of people get caught in the weeds. And so we help to kind of clear out those weeds and help people get to that, that next step. Yeah,
and that's for like any kind of path that you may want to choose, not just for one specific field, right?
Right. Yeah. So what we do, so then what's interesting is that a lot of the topics, so yes, two out of the three of us are scientists. However, the topics that we cover are not science specific. So the idea of being, strong in your soft skills, your ability to communicate with people, your ability to have, emotional awareness, your ability to connect with people and make those collaborations and network and negotiate, those types of things, that transcends whatever discipline that you're in. But I would be, remiss to say that is the bulk of our clientele scientists? Yeah. But are all the things that we were talking about transition, they could be transcend to any discipline? Absolutely. So we work with we work with organizations and individuals to either help train staff in empowering them to be more empowered to actually go after the things that they want, and or working with individuals to say, hey, okay, you're feeling stuck right now. How can we get you unstuck? And work with you and uncover, again, what behavior you kind of need to start, stop, or continue doing to get to where you want to go.
Yeah, no, that's definitely good and helpful information. I might have to subscribe to it unless y'all, y'all take me, and I don't know, women thing, but I need some consultation because I be feeling stuck sometimes. Everybody has those complacent moments. So that's natural for anybody. So they can maybe just reach out just to, I guess, maybe, I don't know if that may help as well, but
Oh, yeah.
Solicit business for you. I don't know.
No, I'm here for it. I'm here for the business. And a lot of times what the beauty of what we offer, especially with coaching, is this idea to have an opportunity to just talk to someone about you. How often, like literally think about how often do you get a moment to just think about you and your needs and like just strategize about you. So much of our time throughout the day is spent on, what does my company need from me? What does my loved one need from me? What do my children need from me? What does my car need from me? What do I have to go gas it up? I have to, whatever, maintenance it. What does, whatever other thing need from me? Like so much of our day is not spent on you. But the beauty of coaching, that is the one time where you unapologetically can talk about only you, your needs, your pain points, and figure out ways in order for you to overcome those. And so I strongly advise anybody, if you've never worked with a coach, coaching, I mean, that's a whole nother topic. We can have a whole separate conversation about the difference between coaching and mentoring and advising, but a coach really is a sounding board for you. They're someone that you can have like really just open conversations with to really help you focus on the future, where you see yourself going. And I always like to just put this in context to therapy. A lot of people think coaching is therapy. It may seem like therapy, but therapy often is looking in the rear view window, like trying to figure out what happened in the past to get you to where you're at now. Versus coaching, we may glance back there, but ultimately we're looking in that front window. We're trying to figure out how do we, knowing what we know back here, how do we get you there? And it's always forward driven and kind of, like I said, uncovering things you should either start, stop, or continue doing to get you to that where you see yourself going. So yeah, definitely, if you ever want to have a conversation about coaching, that's a whole nother realm that we can go into.
Oh, and it's cool. I like your verbiage, the way you kind of described in detail basically that. But I just got like a couple more questions. I have like two more questions really before I kind of let us go here. But did you have anything? I know we kind of touched on a lot of things. I really have a million questions in my head, but I'm not trying to take too much of your time. But did you have anything that you want to kind of share that we kind of haven't touched on that you'd like to kind of let us know about?
Well, yeah, no, so just a couple things. So if anybody is interested with the STEAM Forward Academy, we are going to have a number of different sessions available for people to sign up for. So we have our winter academy, our fall academy. I'm getting ahead of myself in the year. Our fall academy is starting late September. So if people are interested, they can definitely go to steamforwardacademy.com to register. And then we will have a winter academy that's going to take place at the top of 2022. And then if anybody's interested in coaching or consulting or anything like that, you can always reach out to me. My website is JanitaPritchett.com, and I can connect you with any of the variety of things and people that are in or out of the STEM fields.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I want to make sure I drop all those links below so that way they can have all the contact information for sure. But my last two questions is, I mentioned like this, I guess throughout your whole journey, what was, I guess, one of your most challenging parts of your journey, and then your most rewarding parts of your journey? And then we'll probably end it up like, you don't have to go into too much detail. Just quick something.
Oh, so challenging. Oh, I got all the challenges now, all the challenges. But I think, the perhaps the most challenging journey, the most challenging part of my journey has been this, constant struggle to make people feel, people that don't necessarily value the opinions of people that look like me, that I am worthy of whatever content I'm providing to you, right? So when I worked in the laboratory, I had to constantly, there were times that I would be in a meeting and people would be like, oh, can you go get me coffee? And it's like, but I'm supposed to be in this meeting with you too. Like, and I'm not knocking anybody who
Yeah.
that is your job, but it was, it's this feeling of having to validate myself on all the different realms. When I transitioned from working in a laboratory to working in a management position, well, then it's like, well, wait, you've never been a manager. How do you explain this? And then people then questioning, when I'm making decisions about science in my management role, but it's like, well, wait, you're just a manager. I'm like, well, actually, no, I'm a PhD scientist, so I can actually say this. So I think probably the challenge that any person of color faces is, sometimes feelings of isolation in this field, and this constant, I got to do more to prove to you that I belong here, which shouldn't be the case. Check my record. I got all the credentials behind it. Now, on to more positive notes, my most rewarding. Quite honestly, my most rewarding has come since the pandemic, and it's normally I'm set up in a different space where you would see this painting behind me, but I created this painting called See It, Believe It, Become It, which features and I'll shoot you a picture of it, so in case you ever want to show this to your people, but it's a picture of a young Black girl looking in a mirror, and she's envisioning herself as a Black scientist. And this painting was actually featured on the cover of Analytical Chemistry, which is like a very, very prestigious journal in my field. And then has since, it's caught on like wildfire, quite honestly. And for me, that moment was so pivotal because one, it was, how often do you, as an artist, to be able to get my art featured on a cover of a magazine, but then two, to be representing something so powerful, an image so powerful, basically saying, we need these images out there to encourage others to go into these fields. That for me, I'm a self-taught artist, so I never would have thought that I would get, a painting, let alone in other people's households, but on a cover. And then to now it's actually going to be, prints are going to be sold, and merchandise is going to be sold around it and everything like that. So that's coming out in the very near future. So I'm super excited about that. Yeah. So that to me is my proudest moment, is just being able to continue to wear multiple hats in this field and being able to showcase a lot of my different talents on a daily basis.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up too, because I did have that in my notes and I wanted to bring it up, but I forgot all about it because I just get so distracted by all the questions. So for sure, I'll say that's amazing. So I'm glad you were able to get that recognition on such a prestigious platform. That's amazing. I'm glad.
Yes, yes.
And I'm glad that you're doing so well and you're able to share your story again. And thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been fun.